Hello and welcome to The Locker Room. I'm Sarah Gross and I am here once again with Kelly O'Mara, who joins us from her badass hardcore training camp in Tucson, Arizona. How's it going over there, Kelly?
We're done. I'm tired.
What was your longest bike ride this week?
We did 109 miles with like 7,000 feet of elevation, I think. But we did it too fast.
Is that possible?
Right. It's not the distance. It's how hard you go. That's what I always tell people. It's as hard as you make it, right?
That's so true.
And we made it too hard.
You're 109 miles. How long did it take you? Ride time?
6 hours.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good going. Well, today we're talking about women who are leaders in the outdoor space. And coming up on the show, we have Marinelle de Jesus. She's an American woman originally from the Philippines, and she's used to practice law in Washington, and she started a couple of outdoor organizations. So we're going to talk to Marinelle about some of her enterprises. And in the meantime, in the news, we have a new hijab on the market for athletes from Nike. Kelly, Nike got some pushback about this.
See, I had heard people complaining about how Nike was getting all this positive press and, there's been smaller companies who have been doing this for years. Turns out you were talking about the pushback of people being like, Nike shouldn't be doing this. It's oppressing women. And I was like, oh man, if you want to talk about Nike oppressing women, like we got years to talk about that. Goes back years. This is not the example.
Exactly. And then there was a third pushback about, well, why now? Why didn't you do this sooner? So it feels like they can't do anything right.
There was a demand. Women wanted this. Nike made it. Good for them. They're serving their full market, not just their market that like looks a certain way. Cool. Like, why does everybody get so upset about everything?
I know. I think it's a great thing to have, especially a company like Nike, who's a leader in sports gear, obviously, saying, hey, you know what? If you choose to wear hijab, we're going to provide you a nice one that's breathable so that you don't feel like your ears are on fire by the end of whatever sport you're playing.
Right. And I think obviously it gives more women the ability to participate. And that is what we're all about in terms of getting rid of barriers, right? As long as you give more women the things they need to participate, then they will participate. And that's good. And because, it has all the positive effects that we know come from sports.
Exactly. So this month in the US, I'm Canadian, I don't know as much about this, but it's March Madness. And I understand that as well as a men's basketball tournament, there's also a women's basketball tournament.
You're like, I've heard
through the grapevine. I haven't seen it on TV or on the press or anything, but
March Madness starts this week. It's a big deal. There's going to be a woman calling games during the tournament, Deb Antonelli. She's like the first woman to call games in about 20 years, which is a big deal because men generally don't like women calling their sports, which I think is weird, even though there's lots of women who are very knowledgeable about basketball. This woman has also called a lot of the women's games. So she has practice, and there is a women's tournament that is much less covered. It's an interesting question because is it less popular simply because they have it at the same time? Would it be more popular if you just had the women's tournament in February or in April and then more people might watch? Or we just, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly an interesting argument. The other problem is that March Madness is so big and basketball is so huge that the men's tournament just kind of takes over. I mean, it's like 1.5 million that goes, not that the players make, but that NCAA awards to the conferences, which goes then to the schools of the teams that win. Whereas like the women's tournament has zero. They don't call it prize money. They call it financial incentives or something like that. So then it feels smaller time. You can't even figure out what channels it's on. And I think we're kind of in this like self-perpetuating circle because at the same time, the women's tournament has UConn is one of the most dominant teams in college sports, period. So how can you have like one of the most historically dominant teams and have nobody care? It's weird.
UConn women's team?
Yeah, the UConn women's team.
I'm so Canadian.
You're so Canadian. Oh my God. The UConn women's team is so good, is one of the most dominant. Like they've won, I don't even know how many games it is now, like 2 years of games. Though supposedly even they lose money on their women's basketball team. Like they don't generate as much revenue as they expend. I feel like if you're losing money on that, you're just not doing it right.
Right. And we had this conversation with Catherine Bertine a few weeks ago about, why more people don't watch women's sports. And I think they probably would. It's this chicken and egg thing, right? I mean, put it on TV. And if the women's teams aren't going to get to piggyback the broadcast deals with the men's teams, then like you said, your first point, what's the point in having them at the same time? Maybe if they had them at a different time, it would get broadcast more.
It is also Women's March Madness. FYI, you can go and watch those.
Women's March Madness, and we have the amazing Deb Antonelli, who will be calling the basketball. So good on her. And that leads us to our hype, who is actually a woman who is a leader in the outdoor space. Tell us about Barbara Hillary.
Barbara Hillary is, I don't know how old she is now. She's 80, but when she was 79, she accomplished going to both the North and the South Poles, which is crazy, first off. And she became the first African-American woman to do that, which I didn't know that there hadn't been an African-American woman who had gone to both the North and the South Poles, which is, again, gets to the whole conversation about barriers and what stops people from doing things. And she's really interesting. I mean, she grew up in Harlem. She'd never even been ice skating, never been skiing. She had to go and learn how to dog sled in Nebraska and pass an exam. And then she had to get sponsors to support her trip to the North Pole. And when she was 70, it's crazy.
When she was in her 70s, that is amazing. I mean, I think even my mind has been blown here. 79, even in terms of the age, is amazing. And then all the boundaries she's breaking for women, for the African-American community. What a cool story. So she is our hype.
Way to go, Barbara.
We also have a gripe. This week, our gripe came from a listener who wants to remain anonymous. But Kelly, did you want to tell us what the gripe is?
Well, I don't remember exactly how they phrased it, but their essential gripe was when often women, but women post on social media, oh man, I really want this X amount of X thing, gear, piece of equipment. Hopefully my husband, boyfriend will buy it for me. Or thank God my husband bought me X gear, X piece of equipment, which is absurd because one, you're a grown ass woman. You can buy things yourself. You have a credit card. Two, you're doing in this context, you're doing something that is already expensive. You clearly have the resources to buy. This is not an obstacle in your life.
Exactly. And I even moreover have a bigger problem with the language when it's, I hope my partner will let me buy this. That is even more, for me, even more gripey. It's do not ask permission. Even more gripey. If I'm going to start a new word, gripey. You shouldn't need to ask permission from your partner to buy something, right?
Yes. But I think you're thinking about that in the context of historically women have had to ask permission because they did not have the purse strings, right? But in the context of a healthy relationship, obviously guys, we're not telling you all to go out and buy $2,000 bikes and not tell your significant other because that would be unhealthy and not smart. You should have smart, open conversations about your finances.
A little bit of life advice today in the locker room. Okay, so next up we're going to talk to Marinelle de Jesus. She's a trekker. She's started a couple social enterprises. One is called Peak Explorations and also a nonprofit organization called Trails Without Borders. And she is trying to promote local tourism in remote mountain regions globally. And she's actually originally from the Philippines and moved to Seattle with her family at the age of 13. So let's hear what Marinelle has to say.
Thanks for coming and joining us on the podcast today. I know you just got back from Tanzania. What were you doing there?
Well, I actually went with a group of trekkers through my social enterprise, Peak Explorations. We actually went to go trekking up the Kilimanjaro through the Northern Circuit route. So it was a 9-day trek, but it was total of 12 days being away. And so it's a group of 8 people, and most of them are from Washington, D.C. area. But it's a mix of women and men. And so this was my first trip through my company, so I ended up going with them just to make sure everything is great. I also met with the local operators because the purpose of my company is to actually promote local sustainable tourism. And I met some interesting people from the local agency or the trekking operator because some of their porters are women. And so I was able to actually interview one of them. And it was just kind of quite an amazing experience because from what I learned from the interview and from talking to everyone else there, they have yet to really have a female guide to guide up Kilimanjaro. And she may be the very first one that they're looking at in terms of training. So
well, that's cool.
That's what it was about.
Yeah, that is cool. So tell us a little bit about why you started Peak Explorations. How did you sort of see the need for that kind of organization?
I've been an avid hiker for over 15 years, and I've been doing a lot of trekking overseas, and it's combined with doing solo treks. Sometimes it's guided. And when it's guided, I've met a lot of people from different countries like Peru, Mongolia, Nepal, China, and all these other places. And based on my conversations with the local operators, they wanted to market their tourism, their treks in the U.S. But unfortunately, it's hard to break through the marketing here because the bigger companies are able to monopolize the market. And so I wanted to actually help them out in terms of marketing and being able to basically work on, directly helping the locals in terms of being able to sustain jobs and create jobs and be able to have some income locally without too much, of the money going to the big corporations. So that was the idea. I was asked by a number of operators to do it, but it took me a while to actually decide to do it until after, I took a year off of my office work and decided, this is something I want to do long term. And so the idea is to actually link people in U.S. with local operators, more like ones that are smaller, like mom and pops, the ones that are just starting out, and sort of just to help them out to actually establish their business. So, and it's worked really well because I think the experience is more authentic that way. And the money goes much more directly towards the community versus being spread around through, a big company with so many different overheads. So that's how it came about. Just my passion for trekking and being able to link people.
And how did you kind of get into trekking in the first place? I know you're from Manila, right? How did you kind of find all of this? Yeah.
I think it was actually, I was kind of like a late bloomer with it because I went to law school and I live in Seattle and did all my schooling in Seattle. And then it wasn't until Washington, D.C. when I arrived here after I finished law school and started working as a lawyer that I decided to pursue hobbies. And I just happened to run into a meetup group that does a lot of hiking. And so I started just doing that. And actually, the first time I did a hike, I hated it because the people were almost running when they were hiking. And I thought the experience was, kind of turned me off to the idea. But then I kind of stuck with it and then realized that it's something I'm really interested in.
Well, I'm glad you stuck with it.
Yeah, I could have actually decided not to because of the first experience. But it's great. Over time, I just discovered backpacking and doing multi-day treks, and it just went on from there.
So Marinelle, as a woman who's from the Philippines, have you found there have been barriers in the North American context to you kind of getting into hiking?
I think what's very noticeable about the hiking in the U.S. is it's at least in the East Coast. I'm not sure about the West Coast. There may be variations, but in the East Coast, it's mostly predominantly men that do the hike, that are into the hiking scene. I mean, there are some women, but none of them take a role of being a leader. I think that's one thing I'm seeing because I'm part of Meetup, and so I've been around a lot of organizations, and a lot of the leaders are mainly men, and women do hike, but I think it's oftentimes more sort of just in a role of, sort of a hobby, but nothing to a point where women actually step up and lead. So I feel like in that realm, I feel like I'm still kind of rare in some ways because most of these things are led by men. I'm not really sure exactly why that is, that there's more, the women are not sort of stepping up to that leadership role, but it's over time, it's slowly getting there. But in terms of just the access, at least in the East Coast, it's pretty easy access because there are so many different groups. But a lot of them are still male dominated, and I know a lot of women actually like to hike with groups rather than doing it solo. So that's one other thing I noticed as well in the East Coast.
Yeah, I saw you're working on a movie called "Don't Date a Girl Who Treks." What is that about?
Basically, I wrote a piece for Huffington Post, and it was published in HuffPost and other places. And with Hike Like a Woman and Fat Girls Hiking and all these other women-led organizations, I realized there's a lot of interest for women for their stories to be told in the hiking world. Oftentimes when I go to outdoor festivals, it's usually about men climbing or hiking and not a lot of women representation. So when I started the project, when I started out as just a piece that I wrote, and then it became sort of, went a little viral, and a lot of people appreciated it, both men and women. And then when I started thinking about maybe doing sort of a collage and a documentary and just a film whereby I would basically obtain like photos and videos of women hikers themselves directly so they can be involved in the project, I actually got a lot of submissions. And not only that, when I asked a simple question of what hiking means to you, it was kind of an unusual phenomenon where the women were writing me 2-3 pages long of their story. So it felt like to me like they wanted to be heard. Like I didn't even, the question was just simple, like what does hiking mean to you? And they would really, really open up about it. So that actually inspired me to really, take it to the next level and just basically work on a film project where it's going to be basically a collaboration of all the women hikers and their photos and their stories. And I supplement the film by featuring women on my website called Outdoor Women's Voices so that they can fully explain, their story. So that's how it kind of came about, and there was a demand for the voice to be heard, and that's what I noticed. So I decided to go forward with the film.
And if you were going to answer your own question yourself, what does hiking mean to you? What would you say? What has been your experience?
Wow, that's a tough. I actually didn't think about that question myself. I asked everyone but me. I think, I think it's everything for me. I think it's where I feel very aligned with who I am, sort of the, beyond what I do career-wise and on a daily basis. I think trekking is the place where I feel safe the most, and I feel like being myself, being my best self, to be honest. So I think that's, in a way, it is spiritual for me as well, because I've been to other parts of the world, like Himalayas, and there's certain mountains and ranges that actually just have this sort of vibe. And, there are places where I've felt that. And so I think to me it's very spiritual, and it's it's a reflection of who I really am in terms of my best version. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, it sounds to me, Marinelle, like you're really tapping into a lot of the things that a lot of women feel and creating community for female trekkers and hikers. So amazing work. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Sure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
A couple things struck me that Marinelle mentioned there. One, interestingly, is the sustainable support for local entrepreneurs that she's trying to create in the countries where they hike with her business. And the other one was her own experience of sort of looking around for women who are leaders in the hiking space and in the outdoors and not really finding many.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because obviously you don't need female leaders to have other women do it, but we see that over and over again. We see with when minorities don't want to do a certain sport because they don't see anybody who looks like them doing it, when women don't want to go into the outdoors because they don't see any other women out there, and they figure there must be some subconsciously you figure there must be a reason no one who looks like me is doing this, and that feeds into our issues. Also, I think there is the likelihood that when you have someone who looks like you and who has been through what you've been through, they are more likely to know the problems that you will experience doing those things, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, isn't that true with all questions about diversity, right? When you can have a hero who looks like you, more people are likely to get out there. So we did have another guest lined up, Stacy Kozel, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, who unfortunately was sick today, but what an interesting story. So Stacy was at one point a quadriplegic and she regained partial use of her upper body, but she has hiked a portion of, if not all, of the Appalachian Trail by herself.
Yeah, she did the whole 2,189.1 mile hike. Isn't that the full Appalachian Trail? 0.1.
0.1. I love it.
With like her exoskeleton brace legs. They're like $75,000 each that like insurance wouldn't pay for, which is crazy. And
it's amazing. And as I understand, these leg braces, they basically they know when her knee needs to bend and they allow her to walk. I mean, how incredible is that?
Right. I mean, you want to talk about barriers to the outdoors, and not having legs that would walk would be a barrier.
There's a barrier right there. So we are hoping to catch up with Stacy and do an athlete profile with her for WISP a little later on, because we would love to hear more about her story and how she did it. And on top of it, she had to plug in these leg braces every couple of days, and they couldn't go in the rain.
Which makes hiking the Appalachian Trail challenging, because my understanding is there is rain, but not frequently electricity.
Exactly. So if Stacy can do it, anyone can do it.
That was what she wanted to show other people, right? It was to show them that they too could do this. So
yes, good for her. Why do you think, Kelly, there are fewer female leaders who hike and climb and do kind of outdoorsy things in general?
You could make the argument that's always been made. It's just women don't like it, right? Like, oh, women just aren't into the outdoors. Women want to do other things. It's biology, right? It's just science, Sarah. This isn't sexism.
Biology is destiny.
Right.
It's not sexism. It's biology.
I want to go hiking by myself or camping. That sounds terrible. I don't want to do that.
Right. So you have the fear of being isolated and vulnerable and being attacked. This is a real fear.
It's a real fear. And I think when you talk a lot about women going in the outdoors on their own, there is a whole study of, it's widely acknowledged that we all think it's more unsafe for women. If you poll hikers, outdoors people, everyone, men, women, everyone thinks it's more unsafe for women. And we've like kind of had that ingrained in us. But I'm not sure if that's actually true. Backpacker magazine kind of went and studied, like tried to find out if this is actually true. And it's a little hard to tell because they don't like keep data for every hiker broken down by gender. But I mean, there are some facts that we do know, which is, you're less likely across the board, men and women, to have a crime committed against you on public, like on national parklands than in regular life, like way less likely. We know there have been, 9 murders on the Appalachian Trail since the mid 70s, and it was like 4 men and 5 women. It's not, we know you're more likely to be sexually assaulted by someone than by some random dude hiking. And so there really isn't actually a ton of evidence that it's super unsafe for women. I think and I don't want to say we've allowed, because I'm not victim blaming, but we, being society, have allowed this space to be have allowed ourselves to be excluded from it.
Right, absolutely. It's kind of that cultural piece where we need to continue to educate people about sexual violence and how, not just how to avoid it from a female perspective, but also how to create a shift in everyone's thinking, like on university campuses.
Right. I do want to not oversimplify and tell ourselves that, women just need to think different, men just need to think different. Right.
Right.
There are obviously also like, these are fears born out of real violence and like real issues.
Yes, absolutely.
I get freaked out running on Mount Tam where I live because there was a Mount Tam strangler that attacked female joggers. Like, that's a real thing, right? So
yeah, and we had an issue here too, actually on the university campus where there are some wonderful trails. I for a while there carried pepper spray or
a whistle. You're like blowing your whistle.
Mace. That, not pepper spray. As I said it, I was like, I'm pretty sure pepper spray is not legal. It might have even been like bear spray. In Canada we have bear spray, but it would blow the socks off a bear. This stuff has so much pressure. Anyway, so I carried this in my hand for a while we had this issue of the same guy actually attacking a couple people. And actually, what was amazing about that story is he didn't get away with it. The women fought back, and he never actually, perpetrated violence on anyone. They just kicked him in the balls and ran away, basically.
Doesn't work for me. I pretty much get scared of everything all the time.
When I'm out in a remote location, I like to remind myself how unlikely it is. I mean, just bring my logical brain back to how unlikely it is that there's someone hiding out there in that remote location, just ready to jump on me. And then usually that calms me down a little bit. Logic calms me down. And on that high note, I guess that's about it for this week's Locker Room Talk. Thanks so much again to my co-host Kelly and to Marinelle for joining us today to talk about some of the amazing women leaders in the outdoor space. Bye for now.